Hey guys, welcome back to more neighbor stories. What would you do if a Karen repeatedly vandalized your mailbox? OP had a great idea, so let's dive right into the video to find out what happened. And the first one starts like this. So for background, I'm a contractor and I've been one for nearly 20 years and have experience with simple woodwork, painting, plumbing and landscaping. I would like to consider myself more well-rounded than anything else and have helped out a lot of my neighbors and friends with small fixes that would have cost them double if they went to a company for repairs. It is not my main source of income either, but having a lot of experience eases the people that I do get hired by. I live in a quiet suburb, a good mile from any major roads. The street I'm on leads to outside of the neighborhood, so it is a fairly busy street in comparison to some of the streets in the community. I really like it and the neighbors are not so bad. The one that holds a special place in my heart is the one that lives right across the street from my home. I will call my neighbor Mark. I've known Mark for as long as I've lived in the neighborhood, which is going on a decade this fall. He's a great neighbor, always willing to help out if your car is stuck in a snowbank or if your lawnmower runs out of gas. He's always been on the quiet side, never making a fuss about a situation he is in, but he's more than willing to jump in and help you with whatever assistance that you need. I'll always be grateful for having Mark living right across the street. Now I have another neighbor who lives 2 doors down from me. We will call her Karen because she is one of the pettiest people I've ever had the privilege of meeting, and I wish I never met her. She's the exact opposite of what a neighbor should be. She has called the city on people who are so-called in violation of codes. She does not help anyone if they ask her, and she refuses to clean up after her own mess. The latter is what I want to talk about, which is Mark's mailbox. There's nothing different about Mark's mailbox compared to the rest of the neighborhood's mailboxes. However, it is the only one that is right on the street instead of attached to his house, so it's like it was an affront to Karen. So instead of pulling her usual stunts of calling up codes about it, she would run his mailbox over. She did it 3 times before Mark came to me to ask for help. I did not really realize how many times Karen had pulled the same stunt, since I was usually at work when it happened and Mark had righted the mailbox when I got home. This time though, it happened when I was home and I heard and watched her run it over and then back her car over it to squish the mailbox entirely before she drove off again. Mark asked if I could help fix it and I told him I would. So I did want to make sure that I confronted Karen about it before I did, if only to understand why she decided to take her rage out on a piece of someone's lawn. I tried to talk to her, but she would not hear me, just flat out ignoring me when I brought up Mark's mailbox and slamming a door in my face. Afterwards, I went to Mark and told him I would help fix the mailbox so that it was better than ever. I actually did the job for free, not wanting to make the poor guy pay for fixing something that he needed in order to get mail. If anything, I might have been a bad person by not explaining how I improved his mailbox and the post it was on. So here's what I did. I poured concrete into the post and around where it was situated so that it would take nothing less than a tank to knock it down. Mark thanked me for helping him, and for about a month things seemed fine. Well then, one morning I was getting ready for work when I heard a sickening crash outside. I ran outside without looking, afraid that someone had gotten hit or had hit something important, and well, instead I saw Karen getting out of a car that had its entire front almost caved in. The culprit of the cave-in? Mark's mailbox. Mark came out a few seconds later asking what happened, and Karen said that something in the road made her swerve into Mark's mailbox. She demanded that Mark take responsibility for damaging her car, and her shouts bringing out a few other neighbors to see what was happening. Mark was calm, letting her know that it seemed like his mailbox was finally able to take her hints. Karen sputtered a response, but Mark just went back into his house, shutting the door. Karen was able to drive away from the scene, but I figured as soon as she turned her car off, she was not going to be able to get it to turn back on. Well, after that incident, Mark never had another issue with Karen running down his mailbox. He did, however, reach out to me regarding a summons to court where Karen wanted to sue him for the damage caused to her car. He wanted me to testify as a witness who replaced the mailbox after Karen crushed it. We did end up going to court, Karen testifying that Mark had orchestrated the crash that led to Karen's car getting totaled. I testified that I was the one who replaced Mark's mailbox after it had been flattened by Karen's car repeatedly. Mark had been able to collect pictures from neighbors' video doorbells of Karen peeling down the street to hit his mailbox on all 4 occasions, which include the date of the accident that totaled her car. The footage showed that there was nothing in the road and that Mark had not even been outside when the accident occurred, which left Karen trying to scramble and figure out how she could still come out as the winner of the case. She did try to put in evidence that I mailed the mailbox stronger to spite her, but because she had been the one to destroy Mark's mailbox, he needed a new one that would be more sturdy than what came before. He had a federal right to a mailbox to collect his mail, and the fact that I did it showed that it was just a job that Mark had contracted. I did tell the court that I did it for free because of the damages that had been caused to the box, so I never lied about why I did what I did. Karen lost the case in the end. The mailbox was not a deterrent in the road or extended past Mark's property. It was a legally built piece of his property that just happened to be more fortified due to previous issues with its integrity. The final verdict came months after the accident, but Mark was satisfied that he didn't have to pay damages, and I was glad that the mailbox would never have to be knocked down again in order to make a point. And the next one is titled, "Am I the a-hole for telling the HOA to get bent when they demanded a permit during an emergency?" And by the way guys, if you still enjoy the HOA stories, then please don't forget to like the video, because that would help me tremendously. So I, 52 male, never wanted to live in a neighborhood with an HOA. I've always been a live and let live kind of guy who believes that people should be able to do what they want with their own property as long as they are not hurting anyone. Unfortunately, when my wife and I were looking to downsize after our kids went to college, the housing market in our area was brutal. The only house that checked all our boxes, single story, decent yard, good location, happened to be in a neighborhood with an HOA. "It won't be that bad," my wife assured me. "We are responsible homeowners, we keep things tidy, we won't have any problems." I was skeptical personally, but agreed to give it a chance. The house really was perfect for us, and the neighborhood looked well maintained, so about a year and a half ago we signed the papers and then moved in. For the first few months, everything was fine. We received the HOA handbook, which was about 50 pages of rules and regulations. I skimmed through it, rolling my eyes at some of the more ridiculous rules, but figuring as long as we kept our lawn mowed and did not paint our house neon green, we would be okay. Then I started noticing the violation notices. Our trash cans were visible from the street, we had to build a special enclosure, the wreath on our door was non-standard, had to take it down, and our garden hose was not properly stored, had to buy a specific type of hose reel. Each violation came with a warning and the threat of a fine if not corrected within a specific time frame. It was irritating but manageable. What bothered me the most though was the sense that we were constantly being watched and judged. I felt like I couldn't take a step outside without some neighborhood busybody taking notes and potentially reporting us for some trivial infraction. One of the strictest rules, which I discovered after a neighbor got hit with a massive fine, was about trees. According to the Homeowner Association, no homeowner was allowed to remove or significantly trim any tree on their property without first obtaining a so-called tree permit from the HOA. This permit required submitting a written request, having the tree inspected by the HOA's landscape committee, and paying a $75 processing fee. The stated reason was to maintain the neighborhood's mature tree canopy and aesthetic appeal. I thought this was excessive, but since we had no plans to remove any trees, I did not worry about it much. Well, until the ice storm. Last winter, about 6 months after we moved in, our area was hit with the worst storm in decades. It started on a Friday night with freezing rain that quickly accumulated on trees, power lines and roads, and by Saturday morning everything was coated in a thick layer of ice and the weight was causing branches to crack and fall throughout the neighborhood. We lost power around 10 AM on Saturday with no electricity for heat in the middle of winter. Things got cold fast. We were huddled in the living room under blankets considering whether to try to drive to a hotel. The roads were treacherous when we heard a massive crack followed by a crash from next door. I ran to the window and saw a massive tree in our neighbor's backyard had split and fallen directly onto their deck and through their sliding glass door. It was bad. The deck was completely crushed and there was a tree literally poking into their kitchen. I threw on my coat and boots and rushed over to make sure everyone was okay. My neighbor, a guy in his 60s who lived alone, answered the front door looking shell-shocked. "Are you alright?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "I was in the living room when it happened, but my kitchen..." He gestured helplessly. I peered around him. Cold air was rushing in through the broken door and there were branches and glass scattered across his kitchen floor. The situation was dangerous and getting worse by the minute as ice continued to accumulate. "Let me help," I said. "I've got a chainsaw. We need to get that tree cut back before it does more damage or someone gets hurt." My neighbor looked relieved. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." I hurried home to get my gear. I then told my wife what was happening, grabbed my chainsaw, safety goggles, gloves and a tarp and headed back over. The situation was even worse than I initially thought. The weight of the ice was causing the remaining portion of the tree to sag further, pushing more of it into the kitchen. If we didn't deal with it quickly, it could collapse the entire back wall of his house. I fired up the chainsaw and got to work cutting away the branches that were poking through the broken door. The plan was to remove enough of the tree to prevent further damage and make it possible to secure the opening temporarily with a tarp. I'd been working for about 15 minutes when I heard someone shouting over the noise of the chainsaw. I turned it off and looked around. Standing at the edge of my neighbor's property, bundled up in a winter coat with an umbrella to shield against the continuing freezing rain, was a woman I recognized from the HOA board. She was the compliance officer who seemed to take special joy in handing out violation notices. "Excuse me," she called out. "Do you have a permit for that tree removal?" I thought I'd misheard her. Surely, even the HOA would not be this absurd during an emergency situation, but she started walking towards us, her face set in that special look of righteous indignation that I'd come to recognize from previous interactions. "There's a tree in his kitchen," I said, gesturing to the obvious emergency situation. "We are trying to prevent further damage here." "I understand," she said in a tone that made it clear she didn't, "but the HOA regulations clearly state that all tree removals require a permit regardless of circumstances. You should have contacted the emergency number in the handbook." My neighbor stepped forward. "My house is being destroyed right now. There's freezing air pouring in. Are you seriously saying I should wait for a permit?" "Rules are rules," she insisted. "The proper procedure would be to call the emergency number, have an HOA representative assess the situation, and then—" I'd heard enough. "We are in the middle of an ice storm," I said. "Power's out, cell service is spotty, there's a tree in his kitchen, this is an emergency. The tree is actively causing damage, and we are trying to prevent it from getting worse." "Nevertheless," she continued, pulling out her phone, "I will need to document this violation. You will need to cease work immediately until proper authorization is—" "Get bent," I told her. "Seriously, this is ridiculous. We are dealing with an emergency here, and we don't have time for bureaucratic nonsense. You can take your permit and shove it." Her mouth fell open. "Excuse me? That's completely inappropriate. I will have you note that I'm recording this interaction and this will be reported to the full board. You can expect a significant fine for both the unpermitted tree removal and your abusive language." My neighbor, who had been watching this exchange with growing disbelief, finally spoke up. "You need to leave my property now. We are handling an emergency situation and you are interfering." "Fine," she sniffed, "but you can both expect to hear from the board about this." And with that, she turned and carefully picked her way across the icy yard. I looked at my neighbor. "I'm sorry about that. Should we get back to work?" He nodded, looking both angry and bewildered. "I cannot believe that just happened. Thank you for standing up to her, though." We got back to work and managed to cut away enough of the tree to secure a tarp over the broken door, containing the worst of the cold air invasion. The entire process took about 3 hours. By the time we finished, we were both exhausted, cold and wet, but at least his house was somewhat secured until proper repairs could be made. The HOA did not waste any time. 2 days later, when the roads were finally clear enough for mail delivery to resume, we both received formal violation notices. Mine accused me of assisting in unauthorized tree removal and using abusive language towards an HOA representative. It included a fine of $1,000. My neighbor's notice was for unauthorized tree removal during an emergency and also carried a $1,000 fine. This was the last straw for me. I called my neighbor and asked if he wanted to fight this together. He was all in. First, we documented everything. We took photos of the damage, gathered weather reports from the day of the storm, and wrote detailed accounts of what happened, including the ridiculous confrontation with the HOA representative. Then we attended the next HOA board meeting, which was scheduled for the following week. The meeting was held in the neighborhood clubhouse and about 20 homeowners showed up, which was apparently a larger turnout than usual. When it came time for homeowner comments, we presented our case. My neighbor described the emergency situation with the tree falling through his sliding door during the ice storm. I explained how we had acted quickly to prevent further damage and secure the home, only to be confronted by the compliance officer demanding a permit in the middle of the crisis. "This was clearly an emergency situation," I said. "The tree had already fallen and was actively causing damage. We were preventing further destruction of property." The HOA president, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, looked unmoved. "Our rules are very clear," she said. "All tree removals require a permit regardless of circumstances. The correct procedure would have been to call the emergency number. during an ice storm when power and cell service were out for many people? My neighbor asked incredulously. And even if we could call, how long would it have taken for someone to respond? My kitchen was exposed to the elements. There was a tree poking through my sliding glass door. Several other homeowners in attendance started nodding and murmuring in agreement with us. One elderly gentleman raised his hand and said, "I've lived here for 15 years and I have to say, this seems like an overzealous application of the rules. Common sense should prevail in emergency situations." The HOA president looked annoyed at this support. "The rules exist for a reason," she insisted. "If we make exceptions, where do we draw the line? How about a tree that has already fallen and is causing active damage?" I suggested. This was not a case of us deciding to cut down a tree on a whim here. This was emergency mitigation of damage that had already occurred. More murmurs of agreement from the audience. Another board member who had been quiet until now cleared his throat. "I think perhaps we need to review our emergency procedures. It does seem like there should be some flexibility in genuine emergency situations." The compliance officer who had confronted us looked outraged. "If we start making exceptions, everyone will claim emergency to avoid getting permits." I think most people can tell the difference between a tree that's fallen through someone's door during an ice storm and someone wanting to remove a tree because they don't like raking leaves, I pointed out. By this point, it was clear that most of the homeowners in attendance were on our side. Even a couple of the board members seemed to be reconsidering. After some further discussion, the board agreed to review our case and the emergency procedures in general. They said that they would notify us of their decision within a week. That decision came 3 days later in the form of a letter. They had decided to waive the fines as a one-time courtesy, but added a reminder that in the future all HOA regulations must be followed regardless of circumstances. It was not exactly the vindication we were hoping for, but at least we didn't have to pay the ridiculous fines. This whole experience has made me even more skeptical of HOA living. My wife and I have started discussing the possibility of moving once the housing market improves. In the meantime, I've been documenting all HOA interactions and keeping a close eye on the rules and their enforcement. The incident has also sparked some wider discussions in the neighborhood. Several homeowners have started attending board meetings regularly and questioning some of the more absurd rules. There's even talk of running new candidates for the board next election to bring some common sense to the organization. As for my neighbor, his insurance covered the repairs to his deck and door, minus a substantial deductible. The HOA tried to require that his new deck matches the old one exactly, but enough homeowners spoke up that they eventually backed down and allowed some minor improvements. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for telling the HOA compliance officer to get bent when she demanded a tree removal permit during an emergency? And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this one in the comments. Do you think OP was the a-hole here or not? Well, personally, I would say OP did not go far enough because this Karen was completely out of line and that was completely inappropriate to do during an emergency on her part. So props to OP for helping the neighbor and screw the HOA Karen. Should I have been more respectful while still refusing to comply, or was my reaction justified given the circumstances? Comment number 1, not the a-hole. An ice storm with a tree literally inside a house is the definition of an emergency. That HOA compliance officer showed a complete lack of common sense and basic human decency. You did the right thing helping your neighbor and standing up to that nonsense. Comment number 2, so let me get this straight. During a dangerous ice storm with power out, they expected you to somehow contact them for permission to deal with a tree actively destroying a house? Absolutely not the a-hole. HOAs are out of control. Comment number 3, everyone sucks here, but you are worse. Yes, the HOA person could have been more understanding, but there's actually a section in most HOA handbooks about emergency procedures. Did you even try calling the emergency number? Did you document the situation before cutting? It seems like you were just looking for an excuse to ignore the rules you agreed to follow. Comment number 4, you're the a-hole. You knew the rules when you moved in. The handbook clearly states all tree removals require a permit with no exceptions. You could have called the emergency number while your neighbor contacted his insurance. Instead though, you decided the rules don't apply to you and you were rude to someone just doing their job. Typical entitled attitude. And yeah guys, I have a feeling that Karen would have also been one of the people who were just doing their job in Eastern Germany when it comes to enforcing rules and snitching on neighbors. Maybe that is just my guess though. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/petty revenge. It is titled Unreasonable Two-Row Host. So for the past month or so, I've noticed this car parked regularly right in front of my house. Thought someone had a visitor at first, but started noticing people coming and going from the car and taking pictures of it from my yard, cars getting parked behind where that one was, still in front of my house, and then it driving off. But then one day I saw someone outside taking pictures and went and asked what was going on, and they said their dad rents out the car. I asked if they could pull down a bit down the side of our fence, I'm on a corner, and said that he would ask his dad. The car has remained in front of my house. I was not sure where they lived other than on my street. So anyway, I live in the suburbs, which means big long streets, space for parking is a complete non-issue, and any house here could easily fit at least 3 cars in front of their own house any day of the week. I also understand that it is street public parking, but that happens to be a two-way street. I get on Turo, search for the car in my city, and bingo, I found the car. They took pictures of the car from their driveway and lived 2 houses down. I happen to have a few vehicles, one of which is a giant 20-year-old beat-up F-150. It is now currently moved from my driveway to right in front of their house, in such a spot where it mildly inconveniences them pulling out. I will see if the damn rental is still being parked in front of my house in the next few days, else I will go move another car in front of their house. It's public parking, after all, right? And yeah guys, thank you so much for watching, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you again tomorrow.